What's up, everybody? Welcome back, and we're here with possibly the most chaotic UFC DFS slate of all time. But don't worry, we will break it down for you. Welcome, I'm Brian Jester, co-founder here at Occupy Fantasy. I'm talking with Jake the Snake, owner of MMA DFS.com, about UFC Vegas 74, Kai Car fronts, Amir Albazi, FanDuel, DraftKings, best bets, tips, line of advice, everything you need. Jake, I know it has been an especially long week for you. Even with the week off last week, UFC just came back and threw everything they had at you this week.
Yeah, man, I thought I was ready to go, and then like this week, it was just one thing after another with these late replacements. No real way to get ahead on that. All the action happens the week of the fights, so it is what it is.
It is. So what we'll do, normally we break down the main event. We talk about the newcomers, those making their UFC debut, fighters who have less than 3 UFC fights under their belts, and then give you some prize pick plays, a fight that you have to target, and in our stream parlay of the week. We will still do all of that, but we have to start with the mispricing on DraftKings. So a quick rundown. Jamie Malarkey was a pretty big underdog coming into this card on Monday. He's priced at 6,700. His opponent dropped out on Monday, basically literally 10 minutes after DraftKings released pricing. Jim Miller, his opponent Jared Gordon, drops out on Thursday after Jake and I privately said that DraftKings should release pricings on Thursday because no one drops out on Thursdays, and Jared Gordon said, not so fast. I will buck that trend immediately. So both of these guys, priced at 6,700 and 7,100 respectively, are now facing new opponents. Not just new opponents, but guys making their UFC debut. Not just making their debut, but on short notice. But not just on short notice, up a weight class. And as a result, they are massive favorites, now priced at 6,700 and 7,100. Jake, we racked our brains. You looked through your archives. We found some similar slates, but there truly has not been a DraftKings slate in at least the last 4 years where we have seen two guys this cheap as this big of favorites, plus a coin flip main event, plus all the uncertainty around some of the other shorter favorites on the card.
Yeah, man, this the whole card's crazy because on top of the fact that we have this insane mispricing, we don't have any like great options, in the 9K range. So I mean, it really is like a card with no salary. Like basically like by having these guys that should be in the 9Ks, in the 6Ks, I mean it's absolutely insane. And obviously it's gonna create some lineup builds that are gonna be highly duped because a lot of the field is, gonna take the same approach where they're like, oh, okay, I can play these two, maybe one more dog, and then I'll play 3 to 4 favorites. It's gonna be pretty much the chalk build. People aren't gonna go out of their way to play extra dogs. We're going to see all the dog ownership concentrated. So I mean, I think it's good and bad. It's bad in the sense that we're going to have super clustered builds, and if one of those hits, the winner is going to get like a meal voucher instead of whatever the top prize is going to be. But
Yeah.
At the same time, if those lose, we can just like throw a whole chunk of the field off a cliff if we get some chaos. So I mean, it's boom or bust. It's massively boom or bust more than anything I think we've seen, and it's hard to look back on old data when you have something we've never seen before, like you said.
Right. And we've had some similar cards, right? We had the Nate Diaz versus Tony Ferguson card. However, big difference, two cheap guys who were basically coin flips fighting each other. We had back in 2020, probably to this date, the most chaotic card of all time, when Jamal Emmers was a 7,800 big favorite. Nate Maness and Johnny
Mm-hmm.
Munoz, who's on this card, fought as like $6,700 underdogs. The 80% main event favorite lost that card. Kevin Holland and Trevin Giles was canceled mid card. But still,
Yeah.
that doesn't hold a candle to what this card compares. So, just really quickly, before we get into all the typical breakdowns, let's just briefly discuss each contest type. And again, this only applies to DraftKings. FanDuel, surprisingly, is a very normal slate this time around. So, just play as you normally would on FanDuel's DraftKings only advice. So we'll go low risk contest, so 50-50s, double upset to heads, small field contest, less than 300 people, and then the largest contest. So really quickly, Jake, I know you put in the plug at occupyfantasy.com. Cash games, low risk contest, difficult in the sense that we normally stack main events. This is a coin flip. We don't know who's going to win. We have an idea. We both have different opinions, but it's easy to play Malarkey and Miller and then jam 4 more favorites. So you literally have 6 favorites in your lineup. Just briefly, a couple sentences. What do you think the field is going to do, and how should we approach it?
I mean, I think the field and low risk is for sure going to play, both Miller and Malarkey, and it's hard to get away from that. Just because, ignoring price, they're the two high, probably the two like safest floors for sure. And Malarkey, I would say, is the highest ceiling
Yeah,
on the slate just based on his matchups. I mean, really tough to get away from that. So I think you have to do it and then just kind of play a 4x4 if you're going to play low risk and, try to pick four favorites that outscore the majority of the field there.
for sure. Stacking, no stacking. I know you and I were going back and forth on it. Final thoughts?
Man, that really is tricky. Like initially you look at a flyweight fight and you're like, okay, it's a coin flip as to whether or not it goes the distance. Should be pretty high volume. Generally, that's a fight we're looking to stack. So initial reaction is okay, you stack it, but then you're like, okay, well, what am I doing with the salary from stacking it? And it's like, okay, there's nothing really to do with it. So okay, so you pick one of them. Well, it's a coin flip fight, so you pick wrong. That's going to put you in a really bad spot. So then it's like, well, do you play neither? Because you can, you play Malarkey and Miller, then you can play four favorites that all have higher win percentages than either main event fighter. So yeah, I kind of went around in a circle on this. I can see merits for all of them, but man, the fading the main event, I'm kind of warming up to that idea at this point.
Fair enough. And again, the highest favorite on the card outside of the mispriced favorites is like minus 200, right? And they're not. They all have red flags, all of them. So it's not like you're getting any safety by saving any salary whatsoever. So that makes it interesting. Small field contests, less than 300 players, right? Talking 3 max, 5 max, these types of contests. I mean, is it too crazy to intentionally play a third dog with both of those guys, or playing two other dogs instead of those guys? I think this is where you can start to open it up a little bit and still not get too crazy. The best, again, I look back at those slates that we mentioned. Again, not comparable by any means, but the key was for the winners of small field contests back on those slates. Again, it is different, but they still played in most cases sub 20% fighters, but really sub 10% fighters, which shouldn't be hard because ownership is going to concentrate even more in these smaller contests, Jake.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, man. I don't think you want to get too crazy in small field. I think just a slight differentiator, like you're talking about, like get a low owned fighter in there. Don't build the highly duped thing, but still play these guys in small field.
Fair enough. And then large field, if you run, I know I was playing with it earlier today. If you run our lineup builder with no settings, the amount of salary you can leave over is pretty crazy. If you're on MMA DFS Twitter, there's been some talk about this as well. Jake, it would not be shocking to see the most salary left over win on this card. Most not necessarily just because of those two guys, but because there's so many other coin flips. Like we could like conceivably see like 8 dogs win on this card, which a case would really open up the slate, which is what we want if it's going to be these 50-60% fighters ending up in the optimal.
Yeah, man, it's pretty crazy how many coin flips we have. When you're looking at the average odds on this slate, I mean, it's insane how close everything is outside of the mispriced fighters. So you really can leave an insane amount of salary left over. I mean, you can, normally the max you would even consider would be like 3,000 or something. Like, I think you can open that up to like 5,000 because Malarkey alone is like 3,000 mispriced.
Right.
You almost want to build like pretending Malarkey's, in the 9K and pretending Miller is like in the high 8Ks, and then you can leave that much salary. It's insane.
That's a really good call. That's a really smart way to approach it. Is it crazy to play a 6 dog lineup in large field JPPs? Six dog meaning
Man,
6 sub 8K guys, right? Like counting Malarkey.
yeah, no, I know what you mean. I think that's one too many. I think the 5. So like 5 would basically be like 3 on a normal slate.
True.
I mean, I guess you could make an argument for 6 would be 4. It's if this was like 15 fights, I think you could go 6 maybe. I don't know. It's pushing it, but I think you definitely want to go like 4 or 5. And if you really want to get crazy, I would rather go 6 than 2 or 3.
Fair enough. Fair enough. All right, let's get on to the normal segments. Main event, debuts, good fighter, bad fighter, and then we'll close it out with the final 3 segments. Just really quickly, if you are watching this, We did this with our golf video earlier in the week. Hate to do this often, but again, we want to make sure you're watching and you appreciate the content. Lets us know to continue making these videos. So if you're watching this now, drop a like and drop a comment. Get us to 50 likes and 20 comments on this video. That'll let us know, hey, keep doing these videos, and we'll continue doing them every single week. So we need 50 likes and 20 comments. Again, we appreciate you doing that. If you want to do us one more favor, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Helps us more than you know. It helps you out, get you notified whenever we go live or upload these videos. So we appreciate you doing that. So, Jake, main event, Albazi, Cara France. You and I have been talking all week. I think we were both high on Albazi as a prospect coming into the UFC. And just by the nature of the matchups, really hasn't really fought anyone. Like the best fighter he's fought was Malcolm Gordon, which is not saying really anything at all. So massive step up in competition here.
Hey, what about Zalmagulov?
I mean, we're big fans of Double Z here, but like, let's be fair. I mean, and be fair, Double Z took him to decisions, so fought him the hardest of the four. But Cara France, neither one of us are that high on Cara France, but this is just, I mean, there's no question, huge step up in competition. Albazi likely has the grappling upside here. How do you see it playing out? How does that experience factor play into this? And what's the scoring range of outcomes?
Yeah, I think it's a really tough matchup for Albazi. Just based on Kai Kara France having way more experience, but really the guy has really good takedown defense. It's like 87% takedown defense and really good submission defense. Like we saw him like having rear naked chokes locked in against Bontaran, against Askarov. Both times, really good job fighting the hands and getting out of submissions. So I mean, he's shown the ability to get away from grapplers and to come back and win those fights. So I do think that this is like not only a big step up in competition, but really bad stylistic matchup for Albazi. So I do think he's an interesting prospect, but man, this is one of the tougher matchups he could ask for. And I've never been a huge Kai Kara France guy. I mean, he's kind of a one-dimensional striker, but we got to give it to him. He doesn't grapple offensively, but defensively, I mean, it is there. And I do think he's still improving. He's kind of entering his prime. He's 30 years old now. I would say he's probably in his prime now, whereas a few years ago, I think he wasn't as good as he is now. He's coming off kind of like a back injury and just flew across the world. So who knows if that's going to tighten up. But I think he's got the striking advantage. I think he has the ability to defend the grappling of Albazi. So I think that he's in a good spot to be able to win this fight. Maybe he'll be a little more conservative, just trying to avoid getting taken down, which could slow the pace down some. But obviously we got a flyweight fight. Typically he's a round one or bust option, but the same thing could have been said about Mackenzie Dern on the last slate, and she scored 1,000,000 points. So who knows what this guy's going to do? Neither of these two have ever been to the championship rounds, so we don't know what their cardio is going to look like if the fight gets there. So that adds some volatility. If one guy starts to slow down, that would create the potential for the other guy to just go crazy in terms of scoring. So I would say a wide range of scoring outcomes. At the beginning of the week, I was looking at the price and be like, okay, well, it's going to be a little bit easier for them to get in the winner based on their low prices. But now the price doesn't matter. That changes it a little bit because now we're basically just trying to find the highest six scores on the slate, more or less. Yep. I don't know. I would say both guys have decent ceilings and decent floors.
Fair enough. All right. We mentioned the newcomers. Let's talk about them explicitly now, and we'll go from the first fight of the night until the last fight of the night. Making their debut against Jamie Mullarkey on short notice of a weight class is Muhammad Naimov. One of the slew of Tajikistan fighters coming into the UFC. Real quick breakdown. Again, tough spot for him, Jake, but type of fighter he is, what we can expect from him.
Yeah, so of all the new Tajikistan fighters, I would say he's clearly the worst, and I don't think it's really close. The guy lost a decision to Colin Anglin on Dana White's Contender Series a few years ago. He got mauled in that fight so badly that I was like, hey, Colin Anglin might be able to hang in the UFC. Proceeded to lose his next 4 fights, getting finished in 3 of them. And now we realize just how bad Colin Anglin is. Yeah, man, Naimov, not impressed with anything he does. Super hittable, not a great grappler. I think he's just going to get dominated everywhere. Really outgunned. He's fighting up a weight class. That Anglin fight was at 145. He's making his debut at 155. Much shorter than Jamie Mullarkey. He's only 5'9". Mullarkey's 6 feet tall. I mean, this guy's going to get mauled, and I don't see him lasting long in the UFC.
Fair enough. And the other short notice fighter, who I'm skipping ahead here, but for some reason he's the third fight on the card, fight number 3, is Jesse Butler. I mean, I know it was the last thing we wanted to do on Thursday night was look at this guy's tape and chart his fights, but it did provide some entertainment for the variety of guys that he fought and the competition level and just some of his fights in general.
Yeah, I especially like that fight where they stopped it midway through the first round to clean up all the blood on the mat from his opponent that had lost like 20 straight fights. That was pretty wild. That was like they took like a 2 minute break just to like clean up the octagon.
Dude was nuts.
But yeah, this guy's 31 years old, 12-4. He's coming out on 2 days' notice, like you said, after Jared Gordon dropped out. Obviously, a super tough matchup. He's facing Jim Miller. Butler is basically a one-dimensional grappler. He's one knockout on his record, but generally looking to submit guys early on. Questionable cardio. He's a purple belt. Obviously Miller's a black belt. Butler has trained with Kron Gracie and Matt Snell, so he's trained with some UFC guys, but I don't even know if you want to be training with Kron Gracie necessarily to prepare for a UFC fight. I would say Jesse Butler looks like a fraud, is in the worst spot you could ask for, and he's facing a tough veteran who had some out. I mean, Jim Miller is basically a much better version of Butler stylistically, so seems outgunned everywhere. Really tough spot. I think he was just in the right time, the right spot, and UFC just needed a warm body.
Fair enough. I gotta say, I think my favorite moment of charting his fights was getting to the last fight I looked at and said, "Oh my God, it's 5 rounds," and it turned out everyone was wrong, and it was actually only 3 rounds. So it goes to show that regional matchups, you never know what you're gonna get. So Jesse Butler, short notice against Jim Miller. All right, going back here. Another relatively short notice. We would have been talking about this guy as the short notice fight if it wasn't for these other two guys. Is Muin Gafarov against John Castaneda.
Yeah, I just want to say real quick, when you're short on time and you think you're charting a 5 round fight and ends after 3, there's nothing better than that.
Literally nothing, dude.
So yeah, so we've got this is the good Tajikistan fighter on the slate, Moeen Gafarov. First time I've said his name out loud. It's been a long week. 27 years old, 18-4. This guy looks pretty legit. He did lose a decision on Contender Series to Chad Engler. And if you watch that fight, you're like, okay, this guy's a one-dimensional grappler with cardio concerns. Shot for like 12 takedowns, landed 5 of them, slowed down late in the fight, lost the split decision. Then you go watch his other fights, and he's actually striking in those fights. And you're kind of like, well, why didn't you show that in Contender Series? But he fought John Lineker back in 2019, lost the decision, but survived. I mean, that's something to be said. I think he's pretty well rounded, but man, really, really tough spot coming in on short notice. I think he's a guy we're going to be looking at in his second fight, and I think he's going to be a really interesting DraftKings play in the future.
Love to hear that. Those are the spots we love. Not necessarily for this card, but for the future cards. Finally, the last debutante on the card is Ketlin Souza, perhaps Jessica Andrade's twin sister.
Man, if you watch her earlier in her career, she doesn't look like that at all, like stylistically or visually. And then you watch her last couple of fights, it looks like a different person out there.
Yeah.
28 years old, 15-4. All of a sudden got really aggressive and way better with her striking, throwing a ton of like kicks, spinning attacks, like heavy right hands. She looked pretty good in her last few fights after looking absolutely terrible earlier. So I'm hoping we get that recent version of her showing up here. She's the only debuter on this card that had a full camp. Everyone else is short notice. So obviously that helps her. She's got 8 knockouts, super aggressive, BJJ black belt, although she's typically just looking to strike. But I would say from a grappling perspective, she can grapple off her back if she has to. She'll look for submission, but she's not really looking to take people down. So for a DFS perspective, she's going to be reliant on striking and really finishes. But I mean, at her cheaper price tag, maybe she can get away with a high volume decision. But generally, she's going to be like a knockout or bust type fighter. But pretty interesting prospect. I'm kind of excited to see how she looks here against Silva.
Perhaps the key to the slate, hopefully for us, priced right around Miller and Malarkey at what has to be astronomically low ownership. So let's just keep this in mind as we'll probably be rooting for her on Saturday night. All right, good fighter, good matchup, bad matchup. We look at fighters that have less than 4 fights under their belt in the UFC, get some context to their stats. Very briefly, let's close out the show here, Jake. We have the battle of 2 guys who have less than 3 fights under their belt. Damon Blackshear, Luan Lacerda. Let's start with Blackshear. Good fighter, good matchup, bad matchup.
Yeah, these guys are kind of similar stylistically, right? Like kind of one-dimensional grapplers. I think that Blackshear is a bad fighter and a bad matchup. I think Lacerda is a good fighter. I think it's a decent matchup based on Blackshear being easy to take down. He might be hard to sub, but I think he's easy to take down and doesn't really offer much in terms of striking. So I think it's a decent matchup for Lacerda.
Fair enough. All right, moving on up, we have Daniel Santos, who is expected to be extremely popular given the lack of uh, salary needed to play guys and his high inside the distance number here. 2 fights under his belt.
Yeah, I was gonna say lack of good fighters on the slate. You mean?
Yeah, that too.
Yeah, he's a fun fighter. He's aggressive. He almost got knocked out 3 times in the first round of his last fight, so it's hard to like call him a great fighter. But offensively, he's a good fighter. I mean, he's a little bit reckless defensively, and we haven't seen quite enough to know if he's like actually legitimate or if he's just kind of a wild guy that comes in throwing a million strikes. But I would say he's an interesting prospect, decent fighter, and it's sort of a weird matchup because he's facing a one-dimensional grappler who won't throw down in that wild firefight that Santos would really want. But we've seen Johnny Muniz get knocked out super easily, so from that perspective, I think it's a good matchup for Santos to find another finish.
Fair enough. All right, and finally, 2 more fighters. Karini Silva as the highest price fighter on the card. She good or bad, and is actually a good or bad matchup against the newcomer Souza.
So I think she's good, but I think she has questionable cardio, which it's always, that's always like a catch-22. Like, yeah, you're good when you can breathe, but if she fades, that anyone that has bad cardio, as soon as you start fading, then you're a bad fighter at that point. But when she's fresh, she's a good fighter. She's a dangerous striker, good submission threat. I just wonder about her cardio. And from a cardio perspective, it's a bad matchup because Souza's been the distance in her last 3 fights, and 2 of those were 5 rounders. So I mean, I think Souza will have a major cardio advantage, but in terms of an early finish, it's not a terrible matchup for Silva necessarily.
All right, and what about Victor Altamirano against Tim Elliott?
Sorry, I can't see Tim Elliott's name and not laugh, but I think Victor Altamirano is sort of like a mediocre fighter. I don't think he's a massive threat to finish fights. I mean, he's got some submission skills. He's got some striking skills. He's got a really good fight IQ. Honestly, that's probably his like best attribute. But I think he's just sort of an average talent who doesn't cut a ton of weight, so he can push a pace and he can take over later in fights. And we've seen him struggle early and come back and win split decisions. I think that's actually a good attribute in this matchup because we've seen Tim Elliott gassed out in fights. So we could potentially see that again where Elliott starts strong, dominates for the first half of the fight, and then gasses out and Altamirano takes over in the back half. So from that, and Elliott's gonna be pushing a crazy pace for lots of reasons. Go read the write up, but so I think it's a good matchup for Altamirano.
Fair enough. All right, let's finish out the show with Prize Picks play, a fight that you have to target, and our stream parlay of the week. Remember, Prize Picks, use promo code OCCUPY when you sign up to get a 100% deposit match bonus. Go check that out. Jake, favorite Prize Picks play this week. No salaries over there, so we just got regular props to look at.
Yeah, man. There's like normally there's like 1 or 2 that really stand out above the rest. I would say like A, there's not a ton of lines that look great this week in general, but B, the ones that do are all kind of equal. But if I'm gonna pick one, I'm gonna say Jamie Malarkey over 109.5 points. I think that he's got a really good chance just to like completely dominate this fight. And also on Prize Picks, you get takedowns defended, which he could boost his scoring with that as well. So I think he's got the potential to really smash that number and go way over.
Cool. All right, and then we have fight that you have to target, right? Obviously, we have the price favorites, we have the main events. Which fight that you think outside of those, whoever wins is likely to score extremely well?
Yeah, I think that actually goes back to the Elliott Altamirano fight. I think that Elliott's shown some really high upside, and if he gasses, I think he presents a bunch of upside for Altamirano.
Love to hear that. All right, we'll close it out with our stream parlay of the week, and we'll stick to these same 2 subjects. For my side, I will go Altamirano money line. Historically, the Occupy model, when it has an underdog ranked higher than the favorite, that has been a plus EV bet on the money line. Altamirano is in that spot this week, just slightly, but again, it goes to show, given the price differences here, that Altamirano does rank higher than Tim Elliott. So I'll go with Altamirano money line. Like you said earlier, the lines are extremely tough this week. So going with the rare money line bet from my side of the stream parlay.
There you go. I'm gonna go with a safer one too. I'm gonna go Malarkey KO at plus 100. I mean, I think Malarkey had like 12 straight finishes prior to his recent 2 decision wins. I mean, big step down in competition. I think he can get him out of there. So if we pair those together, it's going to be a plus 404 on the parlay.
All right, we'll take that. We'll take a small win, plus 404. I mean, the plus 100 makes zero sense to me. I know he'll probably win a decision now, but given his money line and the short notice nature of this fight, I truly don't understand how it's only plus 100.
Yeah, now he's going to knock him down and then immediately like wrap up like a choke.
Exactly. All right. So that'll do it for this video. We appreciate you watching as always. You can get Jake's work at MMADFS.com, the sheet, the archive, premium DFS and betting content. Go check that out. Occupy Fantasy, the daily plug. All the top plays and lineup construction tips. Our Occupy model ranks every fighter, FanDuel, and DraftKings. Our lineup builder allows you to build up to 300 lineups. It is incredibly important this week, even if you're only building a couple lineups. This will show you what is possible with salary on DraftKings, so make sure you check that out. All the links are in the description below. And again, if you're still watching this, we appreciate if you get this video to 50 likes and 20 comments. Just drop a comment, let us know what you think, either opinions about the card or what you thought about this video. That'll let us know that we should keep doing these videos every single week. And again, make sure you're subscribed. We appreciate that as well. So for Jake at DFS_MMA on Twitter, I'm at Brian Jester FF for MMA DFS and Occupy Fantasy. Thank you for listening and good luck at UFC Vegas 74.